This episode of Planted is brought to you by Pax Labs.
The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sarah Pine. I'm Sarah Pine, your host, and on this episode of Planted, I am joined by Jamie Pearson, a global cannabis strategist, CEO, coach, and founder of New Holland Group. Jamie has been in the center of international cannabis business development, working across emerging markets, advising companies on how to scale complex regulatory environments. Today, we're getting into what the U.S. federal cannabis policy shifts could mean globally, how businesses should actually be preparing for what's next, and the leadership skills it takes to build in an industry still finding its footing. Welcome, Jamie. I'm so excited to have you here today. We got to have a little chat on the show in Barcelona at ICBC this year, but now we're going to get a little more of a deep dive, and I'm super excited to chill with you.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've been in the industry for quite a while, and you've worn different hats in leadership. You've had a front row seat to the cannabis markets developing globally. What first pulled you into this work?
Oh, I've told this story a million times, but for those of you who haven't heard it, I'm 57. So my dad has been growing cannabis about 60 years. I grew up with a dad who did 2 tours in Vietnam, and cannabis was what made him feel better. He's never been a drinker. And, back in the 80s, at the height of the war on drugs, it was really dangerous to be cultivating cannabis. And it put, you had to risk your life and liberty. So I had a dad who did that. And I was a high school and college athlete, so I was not a cannabis smoker. I was not a big fan of that activity. I think I kind of snubbed my nose at my dad. And I always say when I got older, he got smarter. And I started with my opportunity that I had at Bang, started to understand that my dad was the one that had it right all along. And the opportunity at Bang, which I was the CEO of Bang for 3 years, and I was the COO for 4 years. So, I was at Bang for 7 years while the legalization was sweeping America. I got that opportunity because my cousin on my mom's side is DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill, and Muggs and the band were looking for an opportunity to make some money off of, their activism, but they were really wanting not just to slap their name on a product. It was very important to them that whatever they did, that it would be good, that they would be proud to present it, and that it was not just some product, and the Cypress Hill logo going on it. It was their product. And so Muggs asked me if I would go out and, figure that out for them. And so that was kind of what started me. I went to my very first MJ Biz, which was the second MJ Biz that at the Rio that ever took place. And then I found Bang, we did the deal. And then I stayed there for 7 years.
Prior to getting into cannabis, you have a really rich history with your background, because you have a background, the coffee, a background in law, in education, and also as an entrepreneur.
Oh, maybe it was all leading me to this point, but I think it was just a big sign that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I left college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and all my friends were either going to med school or law school. So I applied to law school, got in, did my first year of law school, and realized if I stay in this career, I'm going to have to keep track of my hours in 15-minute increments, and I'm only going to get paid when my butt is in a seat. And that didn't resonate with me at all. So I decided not to pursue the law. And the reality is the legal training that you get your first year of law school is really the basis. And then you go do your internships and figure out your practice area. So I had enough legal training to be dangerous to myself. You think you know everything, but not enough to actually be a lawyer. But I am pretty good with contracts, and especially reading them and understanding why lawyers write it this way versus that way. And so I just have kind of a critical eye for that. And then I went and decided that what I wanted to do was be a teacher. And so I went back and got a master's degree in education and really loved teaching. I loved being in the classroom. I loved being with kids, but wasn't a huge fan. The pay was terrible and dealing with the adults wasn't fun. So um, while I was teaching, I started investing in real estate, buying rentals to augment that terrible salary, and really took a liking to real estate investment, and built a sizable portfolio, started a property management company, and then started investing in real estate for friends and family, and built a large company. Um, and it's afforded me all of, and then I got lucky because in Montana, COVID and, the show Yellowstone
Oh,
have taken
yeah.
my portfolio, which was, plugging right along. And the next thing I know, I just got lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. Um, and that's the profession that I really sunk my teeth into. I was a real estate investor for, a good 25 years. And I'm flipping a house right now. I still do it. It's still fun. And it's a lot easier way to make money than cannabis. But, it also becomes a grind. So I kind of feel like I'm the luckiest person because I have a little bit of the real estate world still in my life. And then I'm doing global cannabis, and it allows me to travel the world, hang out with cool people, and I've just amassed a Rolodex, a reputation, and a lot of knowledge along the way.
Yeah, I wish that when we were younger that more people had the conversations with us around. Yeah, I kind of think the coolest thing to do is to ask a kid, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" Because like
Yeah,
I tell my nieces, you're going to do a lot of things. Like explore
right.
them all, and you'll get something from every experience till you figure out like what your heart's work is, because it's a process. I People who find a career, stick with it their whole lives, I'm always like, either you feel like you have to stay with this because you feel like you have to make a choice and stick with it, or you are super lucky that you found like the right fit.
You found your thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know
Yeah.
I've done a lot of weird jobs through the years or careers, and it seems like there's always some bit of it that I actually put into my work now,
Of course.
you know?
Of course. Yeah. And I told my own kids, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah.
And, the other thing I say a lot is that, inertia dictates a lot of what we do. An object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in motion. So part of it is if you don't know what you want to do, just get yourself in motion, get started somewhere. And I'm a big believer that people cross your path for a reason, and we hear that, that quote about sometimes it's for a day or a lifetime or whatever. But I do believe that wherever you put yourself, um, that's where your path's going to cross people. So wherever you put yourself is where inertia starts. And I made the decision when Muggs asked me to help Cypress to jump into the cannabis industry. That was the moment that my life changed because I said, okay, I'll give this a try. And I never looked back, but I leapt. And now that object in motion has stayed in motion. And I've been, here ever since. So I'm really grateful to Muggs for that. And, and he's come along the way on parts of the journey. He did a lot of work with me on the Bang brand and, helping me understand the culture, because the reality is, and I think about this and I say this a lot to my clients that are trying to enter the global market. It's that there are markets that I haven't found one yet that doesn't have an underground cannabis market. There is
Mm.
cannabis everywhere you go.
Mhm.
And in some places like New York City, it was a huge part of New York City. It was the largest illicit user of cannabis in terms of volume around the nation, and they were getting most of their cannabis from California. People in the industry understand that there was always this back door where the good cannabis went to New York. But maybe in Oklahoma City, it's probably a bad example. That's probably, maybe Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know. Name a place in America that, Omaha, Nebraska. Maybe there wasn't a huge underground movement. There was probably people like my dad who were very quietly making sure they had access to the plant. Um, but I think in New York, it was so big that, the police had to be, it was just part of life there. And I think going into these markets, you have to understand that every market you go into has some form of a culture that's there. And Muggs was really instrumental in helping me understand in the LA market. Cypress was always big in South America and big in Japan and big in Germany. That part of what they did was rallied that market everywhere they went. They were tied into that cannabis culture everywhere they went because of their music. And so he really brought me along on the culture side of things to understand kind of the do's and don'ts and the facts of how things are. And I think the companies that are trying to break into Europe need to know first, okay, who are the people that are kind of controlling that culture? Who do people respect? Because you really do need to understand the culture side of it before to make good decisions on the business side of it.
Yeah, the culture is really strong, and it's something that we always have to remember to honor. And I imagine that Muggs is, with legalization, I know Jeff has mentioned this, like when they would play MSG, the one thing that used to bum him out before legalization was when he'd find out there were people who came to see him play that got pulled out of line because they were caught with a joint. So it's got to be nice for Muggs to know that his fans are a lot safer from that they can enjoy cannabis while waiting to go in to see a show, and they're not going to get, picked up, because that's just it's not what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I think, Muggs has talked a lot about how, there are certain cannabis strains that he likes when he's making music, and certain ones that he likes when he's reading a book, and certain ones that he likes when he goes to sleep. And he's got all those years of experience to figure all of that out. And there are a lot of newcomers, coming into the industry right now. They're like, grandmas that are like, maybe I'll take a gummy to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And they don't have the luxury of, 40, 50 years of cannabis use to understand that different strains are going to do different things for their body. And I think for him, knowing how much cannabis has helped him in making music and in his creative pursuits, I think he's just always been an activist, because all of those guys have believed that we all need access to the plant. And I think the funny thing is, it's the suits, it's the rub, right? It's, you want to have everyone have access to the plant. And then what makes access to the plant possible are when the sort of general mills of cannabis come in and corporatize it, then it changes the nature of what it was when it was illegal, which was this underground group of people that all had this thing in common. And now it's become mainstream. And so you lose a little something. And it's kind of like my real estate portfolio in Montana is, I love the fact that it's gone up in value, but the necessary evil of that is it means that we got all these California, no harm.
No offense taken.
No offense to you, but we've got all these people that are not from here that come here, and then they change everything that makes it special, because now it's just got a bunch of California people bringing California people here. And it's not, the Montana that it always was. So you always have to give up a little bit to make progress. And a lot of times it's the flavor of what makes it special.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of, I think that the dark and the light side of it for I don't want to speak for the Cypress guys, but I imagine that in talking to Muggs too, that's part of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I've experienced it too, being originally from the Upper Peninsula, and over the pandemic, like it's become like the new Traverse City. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe how much houses are going for. It's insane. But it's like, you see, it brings abundance. And with that, it changes the balance a little bit. When you zoom out, what is the biggest misconception people have about global cannabis right now?
Well, I think there have been a lot of headlines that say Americans can now export to Europe. And it's like, well, yeah, but no. That's one of the big ones. There's a whole bunch of hoop jumping that's going to have to happen before Americans can export globally. And it's no simple feat to have the licenses and have the compliance in place. It's not just, I've got a cannabis grow, I can get a buyer over in Germany and they'll buy my cannabis. It's really not like that. So I think there's the risk of just making assumptions that are oversimplified. And then I think the other kind of the thing I talk about a lot is that over in Europe, they've gone about this differently. And so I always tell people you have to put a different lens on, because when we talk about medical in America, I always put medical in air quotes, because we're really talking about a parallel system to our healthcare system. You go to a dispensary, you don't go to a pharmacy. So it's not plugged into our healthcare system. And part of that's because we don't really have a healthcare system. It's, just a big profit system that's designed to keep people sick. And in Europe, they really have a healthcare system, and they're there to protect the people in their healthcare system, and their citizens from things like, you're never going to have a $5,000 EpiPen. There are, limits on things so that humanity, if you're in Europe, has access to being well and to being taken care of. And they've put cannabis in their healthcare system, which means it's pharma.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest misconception that people they think they're going to go over and do what they did here. And no, you have to have a pharmaceutical grade grow facility. So imagine everybody's in a Tyvek suit and all the hair is covered and the floor could be eaten off of, and it's been inspected, and it's achieved those level of standards that you could go produce pharmaceuticals in this facility. That is not cheap, and that is not what most grows are. So to get that GAC, the Good Agricultural Practice certification, to get the GMP, Good Manufacturing Process certification, you can do that in the US, but to get them to EU standard is a completely different ballgame. And if you're going to export into the EU, it all needs to be EU GMP, EU GACP. And those standards are around protecting people, not around profits. And so it's a completely different mentality.
Still smoking joints? Okay, we need to talk. If you love cannabis but you're still lighting it, let's look at what's actually happening. When you burn flower, you're creating smoke, and that smoke contains harmful compounds like tar, soot, benzene, and formaldehyde. In fact, almost 200 different compounds have been detected in joint smoke. So how do we know this? PAX decided to study it. In controlled lab testing, they compared joint smoke to vapor from their devices, using the same flower under the same conditions, and measured 16 key harmful compounds. The result is pretty striking. Vaporization reduced those compounds by more than 95%, because when you heat cannabis instead of burning it, you change what you inhale. You still get cannabinoids and flavor, just without all the extra stuff that comes from smoke. This isn't about judgment, it's about information. If you want to learn more, go to pax.com/science. PAX is setting higher standards so you can smoke less smoke. And for Planted listeners, get 20% off at pax.com with code PLANTED20. Yeah, we could learn a lot from that. I mean, it's amazing when I've visited, even just the quality of the produce compared to what we get here just like blows my mind.
Right.
So where are you seeing real momentum globally right now, and why?
Well, there's a lot of places where momentum exists. What I would say is that there have been a lot of people quietly building supply chain. And in this sort of buy low, sell high model, because in a lot of new markets, I mean, do you remember when pounds were selling for $4,000 in California, and now they're like $600, $800, whatever. If you built your model, you built your business on a $4,000 pound, eventually there's going to be price compression, and the good operators will rise to the top and the prices will drop. I mean, these are the patterns that we see no matter what market we're talking about. And you got to remember, we're all building this stuff in elements of prohibition. Even Germany, that has taken cannabis off the narcotics list and legalized federally, there are still so many guardrails around marketing and around sales. And it's not just a simple, all you got to do is grow this weed, package it, and stick it into a pharmacy. Just like it wasn't that here. But the trends are companies securing that supply chain and securing the end shelf. So two things. Medical is where the money is, because if you put yourself in a European, shoes, if I'm European, I do not use my disposable income for medicine. So if I'm using cannabis for sleep, that's medicine. And I do not want to dip into my vacation fund to fund my cannabis product. I expect the government and the insurance to pay for it. That is a European mentality. So the reality is, if I'm a cannabis operator and I know I can get the government to pay for my product, I want to plug myself into that system. So where the real system is going to be solidified, I'm making a prediction. I don't know if I'm right or not, is I feel like there will always be a robust medical, true pharma healthcare system in Europe where cannabis is going to be either an API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient in products. They're going to do research. They're going to figure out what is the correct ratio. If you're 150 pounds and you are menopausal and you want to sleep, should you have 4 parts THC to 1 part CBD or the reverse? They're going to know this stuff because they're going about it from the pursuit of real pharmaceutical insights that are helping their citizens. So I think that medical market's going to be solid forever and ever. Amen. And the people that are solidifying their supply chain, their access to that final shelf, and are building those solid businesses are going to be around for a long time and are going to do well. But I also believe that there is going to be adult use cannabis eventually all over Europe. Right now, there's a pilot program in Switzerland. There's a pilot program in the Netherlands, and there's soon going to be a pilot program in Germany. And then you do have some adult use places, pockets that exist, and workarounds, which, the Americans like to come in and exploit the workarounds because that's what we're good at. But I do think eventually there will be a parallel adult use market. And there will be people who will use their disposable income, mainly tourists, that are going to come over. They're going to want their cannabis before they go to bed, or they're going to want their cannabis before they go to a concert. They will have developed the habit in the US or in Australia or wherever they're coming to Europe from. And they're not going to want to plug into the medical system. They're going to want to just go buy their cannabis. And there will be a robust adult use cannabis market. So I do think that you're going to see 2 parallel markets, and the trend right now is to solidify the supply chain in that buy low, sell high format.
Yeah, yeah. And going into policy, now we're starting to see, we had the news the other week with the administration and the rescheduling. It seems like we're starting to go back into a more bifurcated market, which is, it remains to be seen how that turns out. But in theory, it makes me happy to think that the patients who have been largely neglected with legalization, because a lot of the information and a lot of the products that are helpful for them are really hard to come by now. And it almost seems like, in many ways, as we started to grow as an industry, the thing that people used to say about the movement in the past, where, the whole medical thing was an excuse to create sales, which it wasn't. It was very earnest. But we have kind of reflected that in a lot of our adult use regulatory choices throughout the United States. We've been talking about federal reform for years, but from your perspective, what actually matters internationally when U.S. policy shifts?
I think that the tail that wags that dog is the UN Treaty on Narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that the move that the Trump administration made really allows the American government to legalize cannabis without bumping up against that treaty. And the irony is the Trump administration has a real disdain, a very clear and open disdain for the UN. And yet the treaty, it feels that way. I don't know what's happening in the back channel conversations. But it does feel that the move that they made keeps them from running afoul of the UN treaty. And that treaty is tied to a lot of things. And since the UN still considers cannabis a narcotic, except for when the member countries are doing research or are, supporting the health and wellness of their citizens, there are those things that a sovereign nation is allowed to do. I think that's a part of it. I think another part of it is the pharma, alcohol, and tobacco lobby exerting pressure in the background in different ways. And it's interesting because I think the alcohol industry is starting to hedge. I don't think Gen Z is drinking as much. We know the statistics. Millennials aren't drinking as much. They're losing market share, and I think they're hedging, and they're getting bullish on these hemp drinks. But now we've got the hemp ban, and the funny thing is, you're starting to see the alcohol lobby actually lobbying for the hemp THC products because they've invested and they want to see that stuff flourish. So there's a lot of different competing interests. And when you're talking about the international market, they're all watching us, bumble around and try to get all this figured out. And meanwhile, they've gone about it very methodically with the perspective of what's in the best interest of their citizens, excuse me. And you don't have, their politics is broken everywhere, but not to the degree that you've got a two-party system and nobody wants anyone to get credit for anything. So, we're fighting battles that have nothing to do with the actual issues at hand. And so I think the Australians, the people from New Zealand, we're watching Europeans, we're watching the people in Thailand and Colombia recognize that there is a demand for this product and figure out very simply how can they make money and keep their citizens safe. It's not that difficult to do when you think about the fact that nobody's ever died from ingesting cannabis. We have a lot of pearl clutching, what about the children and all this stuff. And the reality is nobody's clutching their pearls around tobacco and alcohol, which we know kill people. So it's all just a big dance of people getting in position and people with money in our country who control politics, getting their position hedged before the gate opens and everything becomes free.
Yeah. Well, it seems like with big alcohol and big tobacco lobbying money, we're going to be seeing a lot more change for better or worse than we were from the grassroots side. Because, as much as I admire a lot of the activists who have done lobbying through the years, it's just not taken as seriously. And unfortunately, I feel like it's because of a lot of the money that's behind the more professional lobbying. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you see the U.S. as still leading globally, or are there other regions that you think are setting the tone now? I have an opinion about this, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, just for clarification, what do you mean by leading? Leading in what way?
Well, in the past, we were seen as leaders because we were pushing medical use and adult use, but because we don't have interstate commerce and because we don't have anything, well, we may have something on the federal level. It's in many ways, I feel like there are we had an opportunity to be a leader and we kind of missed it because of all the issues that we've had on the federal level. Like other countries are doing better with research or exporting and importing. So does that take us off the table with being a leader in this industry? Have we missed the mark?
I don't think so. I think we'll use wine as an example. We know that there are beautiful wines manufactured in Napa. We know there are beautiful wines manufactured in Argentina. There are beautiful wines from Australia, from the Mosel region of Germany. And every country that or city or terroir that has their beautiful wine that they're developing, it's a matter of your flavor and what you have access to. And so I think about going into the social clubs in Barcelona, and one of the favorite strains that I've ever had in my entire life is the yuzu that you get in Choco in Barcelona. I've not found anything like it anywhere that tastes just like you are eating a lime, and it's so uplifting and it's such a good strain. So I feel like from a terroir standpoint and from a cannabis quality standpoint, everybody's equal in the sense that they can do it the way that works best for them and the people that grow up in their culture and in their communities. I think from a brand building standpoint, America is out trying to brand, whether you call it a strain or a name, you want to go brand Gorilla Glue or Jack Herer or whatever it is that you're trying to brand. I think we would be smarter to be thinking about this in terms of and Sergio Martinez from Blimburn Seeds talks about this a lot. He did on the James Loud podcast. He was talking about how rather than having, we don't do wine where we're like, everybody's doing Malbec, right? And we decide which Malbec grape we want by the winery. I want to buy mine from this winery in Argentina or that winery in Napa. But I decide that I like that Malbec. And that might be that I decide I like the cannabis that's high in the limonene, myrcene combination. And we can start talking about the type of cannabis based on its terpene profile and based on, the flavonoids and the other things that, that make it what it is. And instead of marketing each individual grape, we need to be marketing, the people that are producing the grape and naming the grape cannabis or naming the grape whatever. But we're kind of going about this differently, and it's creating confusion in the marketplace. But at the same time, you have connoisseurs that have figured out which strains work for them. Like we were talking about mugs earlier. And it is what it is. It doesn't always have to function like alcohol. So I do think that America leads in brand building. I think America leads in just the sheer volume of dollars of cannabis that is grown and sold. And I do believe there is something to the fact that we've been growing really good cannabis for so long that there's just a lot of institutional know-how in a lot of people that doesn't exist. And that's why, when I go to Thailand and they say, I've got a California grower. So they bring a master grower in from California, and that is, a badge of honor. We know that there's excellent knowledge and excellent product in the US. And I do believe that, I think that's still true.
This episode is brought to you by Fat Nugs Magazine, a global perspective of cannabis and stoner culture as a bridge to the rest of the world. Right now, you can join Fat Nugs Magazine, Beard Bros Farms, Freedom Grow, and Jailed for Weed in the upcoming Prisoners Edition and help spotlight current and past cannabis prisoners and their stories, because no one should be in jail for a plant. Find Fat Nugs Magazine's beautiful print copies at your local dispensary, fatnugsmag.com, and on socials. Cannabis culture welcomes us all. Yeah. Now, I want to shift a little bit, and gosh, Jamie, we need to do this again. We need to have one where we just do like an international deep dive. But as we're wrapping up, I want to talk about New Holland Group, what you're doing with the wonderful things that you've been doing with biz dev, but also what you've been doing with coaching with CEOs. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I experienced this at Bang, where we had a founder who was a European trained chocolatier. He was a chef, James Beard rated chef, super creative guy, and he founded Bang. And then when it came time and the business grew, scaling the business wasn't necessarily what he wanted to do. He's a creative. He wanted to create things. He wanted to build things. And there's a book called The Founder's Dilemma, and it really talks about a lot of times you're either a founder or a CEO, but it's rare to be both. And so one of the things that I do with CEOs usually is they hire me to come in and help them with their international strategy. And then what bleeds into that is everything. We find out, well, do you have the right butts and the right seats in order to expand internationally? Do you know what your brand story and style guide is? It translatable, not only culturally, language, etc., but does this translate into what's going to happen in the market you're trying to go into? Are you ready? Do you have enough money to expand? These are questions I ask them. And then eventually what happens is I'll say, okay, well, the contract ended they'll say, no, 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 I still want to talk to you. So I've got several CEOs that we've got standing calls once a week. I know I've done the deep dive on their business. I know what their challenges are. And the beauty of it is I don't have a horse in the race. Where if they're contemplating something and they want to talk to their COO and the COO's got a horse in the race and it might impact their job or their role or their whatever, and they're not going to get really honest feedback, they have now a sounding board who's run an international cannabis business, boots on the ground. I understand a lot of what they're going through, and I've run a public company. So I've kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt, raised the money. I'm an investor, I write checks, but I'm also, I've had to pitch for investment. So a lot of these CEOs really value having that outside looking in perspective and a person that they could just bounce stuff off of. And it's been good for my consulting business because I do get to see real time what these CEOs are confronting, in their organizations. And so that's a lot of the founder to CEO evolution is some of it, but I'm also coaching CEOs that are just hired to come in and run businesses. And so I think moving from operator to advisor, there aren't a lot of consultants out there who've walked a mile in people's CEO shoes. And that's one of the things that has informed my lens.
Yeah. And well, I just feel like with all of the work that you've done with companies to help them get to the next level, and then being able to give that kind of coaching and maybe even mentorship, that's just incredibly valuable. And for those of you who are listening out there that are looking to get into the international markets, looking at scalability, or really like getting that inside track on some of the things that you should know as a leader in your organization, I'd really, suggest that you reach out to Jamie and have some conversations. But for people who want to follow you on social media or reach out to you, how do they go about doing that?
I should be so much better at all that. But I full disclosure, it's not my thing, but, I have a website. It's new-holland.group. I'm jboogie.22 on Insta, and it's if you want to see pictures of my kids, because that's mostly what that is. And then I'm on LinkedIn, and I think my LinkedIn, if you just look Jamie L. Pearson, New Holland Group, I think I'll pop up.
Yeah, and if you're at any conference, chances are if Jamie's there, she's keynoting, so come check it out.
I do a lot of speaking, yes. I'm going to speak at the Grow Up Conference, my first time in Toronto on June 1st, and I'm speaking at the Ignite It in Chicago. And I just got done speaking at ICBC in Tallman, and I really enjoy that work for sure.
Well, I'll see you in Chicago, my friend.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And let's hop on. Let's do another episode where we do an international deep dive. It'll be so much fun.
I'd love it.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Until next time, my friend. Thank you.
Okay.
And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sarah Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sarah on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsarah.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn, we are there. So join us, and until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.